Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to goo.gl Traders. My name is Taryn, and we're back again for another bit of a rant video for the modern ban and unban list. So last time during the ban and unban list for the standard format, I did like a top 5 for energy and why it should be banned as far as like certain cards should be banned. Here, I'm going to talk about why modern doesn't need to be changed at all, banned or unbanned. And let's go right down the list. Number 1, modern is healthier than it's been in years. Let's look at the meta right here. All right, we're looking at the MTG Goldfish modern meta breakdown. Number 1, of course, is Tron, and it's 7.85%. I don't know about you, but that seems pretty healthy considering everything else down here is between 7, 6, 6, 6, and it's 4, 3, 3, 3, and going from there, of course. For those of you thinking that Lantern would take over the format or whatever, Lantern is sitting at like number 18 down here. It's like crazy low. I feel like a lot of people who are cringing for the ban list to happen on either Lantern or something like that, I don't think they're taking into consideration the entire full scope of the tournament scene as well as the casual scene. I do feel like a lot of people just kind of come in, watch the Pro Tour, see that, oh, Lantern beat it, and now Lantern is too good and it's going to get banned. And of course, those types of people are the ones that kind of outcry for bans. And this leads me on to like my number 2 point here. Number 2, banning due to minority outcry is not reason enough to ban a card or unban a card. Okay, this may seem like a flip-flop from the standard format video that I made like a couple weeks ago. And my reasoning is behind this is because I feel that WotC knows the best interest, or tries to know the best interest, of all of us players. They came into the standard format, they saw that the metagame was just shaken up with basically just energy decks at the top of the list and new sets not really impacting that much. Of course, you have cards like Scarab God kind of being new inclusions in the energy decks, but overall, energy was still like had a stranglehold on the format, and we had Ixalan as well as Rivals of Ixalan out. We had 4 sets before they really kind of looked at the energy really deeply and kind of had to ban some more cards from it. Now, the reason I think they have the best interest for the player at heart is that they've also banned Rampaging Ferocidon and Remnant of Ruins. So this does mean they have some foresight into understanding the metagame and understanding what to do going forward. If they ban some energy cards, they got to ban some red cards because that was the second deck in the format. The problem here is that a lot of people were still yelling for energy to be banned, and WotC agreed with that side of the argument. But for this situation with Modern, I don't think that actually holds any kind of water because Modern is in a much healthier place than Standard was only a week or two ago. I seriously think that if you're going to yell and try to go for bans, you really need to have like reasoning behind it. It can't just be because dice to removal or good card is good or oh, lack of interaction. Like lack of interaction is kind of what Modern's all about sometimes, and there are decks that definitely relish in that, like Lantern Control. But going outright and just banning the deck because of situations like this or situations like the Pro Tour is not a reason enough to ban the card. And the specific card I'm talking about is probably Ensnaring Bridge because it does make the entire lock kind of work. Without Ensnaring Bridge, it's kind of just a really weird, awkward deck. But moving on to my number 3 point about Lantern Control, Lantern Control is a minority deck with several answers. It's also super difficult to pilot too. As we saw with Luis in the Pro Tour, it's a very, very difficult deck to kind of get going and a very difficult deck to stabilize if you're up against a very aggressive opponent. Unluckily for Jerry though, he didn't have that much artifact removal in his game 1s, and when he got into his game 2s, he really didn't have that much artifact removal again. The problem here, of course, is that his deck was kind of geared towards more creature-based decks, more tempo-based decks, and kind of mid-rangey decks. Going up against a Lantern deck is basically a suicide mission with that Pyromancer deck. And the reason for that is because Lantern Control is a minority deck that can kind of steamroll a deck if you're not prepared for it. If it rises in metagame, we'll definitely have decks that have metagame answers for it. Being a silver bullet in a Pro Tour like that does not mean the cards need to be banned. But let's move on to, say, unbannings. There's been a lot of rumblings right now for Jace the Mind Sculptor, literally Jace the Mind Sculptor, the boogeyman, that needs to be unbanned for the modern format. My point number here for no bans or unbans is number 4, Jace the Mind Sculptor is reductive to the modern format. Like, what? If you guys thought Lantern Control was bad, here's a quote from Corey Picard on Twitter here. To those wondering, Jace the Mind Sculptor will not be unbanned in Modern. If you think Modern Control is miserable to lose to, try losing to a Planeswalker that seals your fate, draws cards, and sets you behind on board state. If you think I'm wrong, buy Disrupting Shoal. For me, I feel like it puts Blue at a kind of an awkward position in Modern. It kind of means that Blue will take over the format. For a long time, Blue was really, really powerful in Modern, and it kind of came back a little bit thanks to Black, and of course some green cards like Collective Company and things like that. If we bring Jace the Mind Sculptor back into the format, Blue will just completely overtake the format, I feel like, to myself. That's a personal opinion, please don't attack me. But I do think that Jace the Mind Sculptor is just overall reductive and not very, like, as far as interactive to the game plan that Modern is trying to represent. Of course, a lot of people are going to say that, you know, Jace is like 4 mana and all that kind of stuff, but that really doesn't matter that much in Modern when you kind of think about it. If you're a card that's a bomb, you're probably going to build a deck around it, and I feel like if there's a deck that's been built around Jace the Mind Sculptor, it's going to be a ridiculous deck, and it's definitely going to see tournament play as soon as possible. Of course, it was banned in Standard, and just imagine the amount of like card pool variety you have with Jace the Mind Sculptor in Modern. There's no way I would see that card seeing play or seeing it unbanned. I just can't see it. As Ristic Study says on his video, he is definitely the boogeyman of the format. And number 5 for me is the final reason here, and I think this is kind of a very important one for us to kind of keep in mind. Number 5, changing or updating the ban list drastically impacts Brewers' outlook on the format, and I think that's very important. One of the things you can kind of say about Standard is that it does get solved relatively quickly, and the reason, of course, is because the card pool is small. That kind of goes away when you get into the larger formats like Modern. There's always something to brew around in the format. There's always good cards, of course, and better cards, but for the most part, if you're a really good brewer, you can actually just build a deck from whatever you want and just kind of go whatever direction you want to go. I do think if WotC does ban cards like Ensnaring Bridge and unban cards like Jace the Mind Sculptor, it obviously does take away some things, but he does give us some more things, for as in Jace, but it does take away kind of the trust that WotC has built with all of the modern brewers in the format. I mean, if you guys don't know, Lantern Control has been around for several years now, like forever, and it's really only gotten popular thanks to cards like from Kaladesh, like Weir of Invention. It's finally a deck that's come together thanks to the card pool size of Modern, and it's kind of a byproduct of Modern itself. If WotC actively kind of shuts down that deck, it kind of proves the point of a lot of brewers in that they should probably stay away from Modern as a format and kind of focus on something more like Vintage, Legacy, even Pauper instead. Now, I'm not saying people would like leave in droves or anything, but it does kind of like give brewers a reason to move on to different formats. And overall, I do think that'll hurt the health of the Modern format. But that's just my opinion, of course. What do you guys think? Do you think Jace the Mind Sculptor is going to get unbanned? I just can't for the life of me imagine that. I saw it in Standard, and as soon as it got banned, I was like, thank you, the demon is sealed away. You know, bringing it back in Modern is something that I can't imagine that happening ever. As far as Ensnaring Bridge or some cards from Lantern Control being banned, I can kind of see it. Like, I understand that deck is difficult to deal with. However, there is a ton of artifact removal in the Modern format. There are cards that do it as like a side ability. I mean, Kolagon's Command was in Jerry's deck. He just didn't have enough copies of it, I guess. To me, I don't think there's necessarily a problem with Lantern Control. Obviously, it's a deck that locks down your opponent. To me, the problem is, of course, is that the metagame matchup against Lantern Control needs to be in every single player's head or in their mind while building a deck. They need to say, okay, if Lantern Control shows up, what's going to be my sideboard to deal with it? It needs to be one of those type of decks that if it kind of comes out of nowhere and kills you in game 1, you have a decent game 2 sideboard game plan to deal with it. It kind of needs to be just like how to deal with Affinity, you know? And honestly, if you're boarding against Affinity, you're probably boarding well against Lantern Control. But of course, that's just my opinion. Like the video if you liked it, dislike the video if you didn't like it, subscribe for more content like this in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.